Hello, and welcome to another episode ranking the episodes per season of Inside Number Nine. You may be thinking, wow, this is a crazy turnaround for this channel. Um, and that's because I noticed there's a Christmas episode this season, and I thought, we may as well get this one out before Christmas hits. Andrew's joining me again. Thank you, Andrew, as always, for being here.
Course.
Um, we are both, I would say, both now fans of this show. I've seen it all. If this is your first time watching, this is Andrew's first time watching. So, yeah, I'm going to go first again. We're on season three. We got 6 episodes to rank. Um, let's get into it. So, we both agreed season one was pretty good with, well, one massive standout episode and a couple other pretty good ones. Season two was a step up. Season three, I think, is probably on the same level as season two for me, with the caveat that kind of what you're saying about season two, the bottom level of this season is up again. I think that the worst episode of this season is still a good episode. Whereas the last couple seasons, there was like episodes I didn't really care for. I like all of these. Um, so my number six is at a 7 out of 10. And it is Empty Orchestra. Um, I do really like the karaoke room setting here, and I love the idea that they're sort of communicating emotions through the lyrics of the songs that they're choosing to sing at karaoke. That's really cool. Um, I feel like this just comes down to it just being the least memorable episode because you got some episodes here that are really dark. You got some episodes where the concept is just so absurd. I think you know which one I'm talking about, a specific episode with a really strange concept. Um, And even though this episode pretty much accomplishes everything it's trying to do, I'm not sure how I feel about some parts of the ending. I like that the ending's more optimistic than the usual Inside Number Nine ending. That's cool. But in terms of like the main conflict, I feel like more could have been resolved. Um, I did really enjoy Steve Pemberton's attempt at a Birmingham accent. That was very different. But yeah, this is like an entertaining, solid episode. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel. Cool setting, which sets it apart. But it's like a good, not great for me. It was entertaining, which I mean, for the bottom episode, that's great. So yeah, Empty Orchestra's my number six, and it's sorry ranks 48th out of 55 on IMDb, which may be a little bit harsh, a little bit maybe.
Yeah. So overall, this season, I think I'd agree with you. It's not like there's anything that tops the highs of the previous two seasons for me, but the consistent quality, I think, is probably the best we've seen yet. Um, Beginning with my bottom entry, which is also Empty Orchestra. I'm still keeping it at a 6 out of 10, but it's a stronger 6 out of 10 than we've seen before. Thought this was, a pretty good episode, but it lacks some of the meat that some of the other entries do. It's just not overly substantial of a story. Maybe a tad too much of the runtime for me has the people singing bad karaoke. If I'm witnessing that, it's funny, but I would almost want to be more of a participant than just watching other people do it on a show. The episode's strength, I think, is it features probably one of the more likable protagonists on the show to date. For me, Janet, the woman with the hearing disability. Didn't take long for me to root for her, and I think the ending is satisfying to that aim. Um, Surely the most traditional happy ending we've had for a series so far, with like spoiler the cheating coworkers basically being exposed and getting their just desserts. Um, but yeah, just not overly that big of a concept is probably what holds it back. Nice touch. I don't know if you noticed, but uh, whenever you could hear the music seeping in from the other room, you could tell it was Karma Chameleon playing on repeat.
I did not notice that. That is pretty cool.
Anyways, so yeah, that's my number six.
My number five is the aforementioned very, very strange episode, Diddle Diddle Dumpling, which is episode 5 of the season. I'm also at a 7 on this one. This was like 22 out of 55 on IMDb, which I found a little bit surprising. I'd never really considered this one to be one of the more well-received episodes of the show. Um, but I enjoy it. The premise is a guy finds one shoe outside his house and then subsequently obsesses over this shoe. But as you can imagine, as you figure out, it's not really about the shoe. Um, it's another interesting one to evaluate because much like what I said about Empty Orchestra, it probably applies even more to this one in the sense that what it's trying to do, it pretty much nails. The characters are pretty well realized, believable, and multifaceted. You really believe this relationship. You believe the love there, but you also believe the sort of frayed tension there as well. Um, he's an unemployed, stay-at-home dad, and I think it's an interesting examination of grasping for purpose when it seems lost in other places. Which leads me to the ending, which, without going into detail, I could take or leave. I think it. I found the episode more interesting when it was more of like an allegory for that like sense of purpose and feeling like you've got nothing in life, and suddenly finding a shoe on the street, it gives you a sense of purpose, even as stupid as that might sound. And then the ending kind of makes it more personal and more of like a spelling out exactly what it all means. And I think that works fine enough. You also get quite a dark twist at the end as well, which again, kind of similar to Tom and Jerry, that double twist. It's not that it doesn't work for me. I just maybe was enjoying it more for the first 23 minutes than the last 5 minutes. But still, good episode, 7 out of 10. It's only up from here. I think those two are pretty clearly my bottom two, even though in other seasons they might have been around the middle of the ranking. So, yeah, yeah, both enjoyable, both solid, but it's a little bit missing in both of them, I think, for me.
Very nice. I'm going with a different number five, actually, which is Private View. And I have that one at a 7 out of 10. Pretty much this show's take on like the Saw movies if it took place in an art exhibit. And for me, this was the strongest so far of like the pure horror episodes we've seen. It's easy to get drawn in with the premise, with like seemingly unrelated strangers being invited to this art show. A film critic, or sorry, an art critic, an older woman with impaired vision, a former reality show contestant, etc. It's hinted that there might be like a mysterious connection as the bodies start to drop left and right in gruesome ways. Um, and the closing note is fitting. Maybe it's not worth like microanalyzing the characters in this short, but it definitely involves like a certain character being extremely crazy and violent given the motive. And I suppose that was a bit of the weak link for me is they just had to be really crazy to justify it, instead of, you know, a more a motivation that might have, you know, made more sense to push someone over the edge like that. But I suppose, you know, that's a bit of kind of what the type of story that it's parodying in a sense too. Um, so I thought it was a good episode. Just that note there on the ending, maybe it could have wanted a little bit more of a twist on it or something. I don't know. But yeah, that's my review of Private View.
We'll keep talking about it. It's my number four. I'm going up to an 8 on this one. It's ranked 34 out of 55 on IMDb, which going into this, I was ready to go to bat for this one, similarly like I did with The Understudy and The Trial of Elizabeth Gadge. I've got to have one episode every video. One, but interestingly, this was one where it's probably the only episode so far of this watch through that has been worse than my memory. I held this up in quite high regard, and I don't think it quite holds up. I think your point is the main nitpick people have against it is that it is a bit much. It's a bit much. It's you get the Peter Kay cameo, which opens the episode, which is pretty funny that they got him in for that role. Um, I agree with you that it's definitely the best of the straight up horror episodes so far. Each one has been better than the last, which is great. Um, You get a cast of varying backgrounds, which they do very well. That ensemble cast of people from all different backgrounds and all different perspectives. Um, and uh, yeah, I mean, it's still good, but in my memory, it was kind of a classic. But in reality, it's like a solid claustrophobic survival slasher horror where you have to, you know, not expect things to totally make sense in terms of character motivations. The gory kills are really cool in this. I just don't think it quite has the same reckless, exciting energy of the show at its very best that you see in my top three, which I think you were kind of alluding to, wanting that extra twist, that extra spin on the formula that this show does so well. And what makes the show so exciting to watch is having that wild card element of anything can happen, which again, there's one episode in particular from this season that I'm definitely alluding to there, and I think you know which one I'm talking about. But yeah, Private View is really good. I sound like I'm down on it, but it's because I'm down on it compared to my memory of it. It's still really good. It's just my number four.
Nice. Uh, guess we're on my number four, which I have as jumping up to 8 out of 10. So that's 4 episodes with an 8 out of 10 or higher. The Devil of Christmas. And I only managed to see this in poor quality, which is a bit of a shame. Although I guess if any episode you can get away with it, might be this one, because it's already an homage to like the campy TV specials. So we're set up in like what almost works like a director's commentary for reasons we don't find out until later. Um, what seems to be like this one-off story about Krampus with like authentically awkward camera work, blocking, and over-the-top acting. Some quite amusing moments here, like seeing the cast set up before and after the shots, uh, out of scene context informing like what goes into their performances. I especially like the knocking of the mom character for being off her marks. Um, if you, I think if you get the kind of style and stories that they're parodying, it really helps this episode land, and that's what makes it so great. But it wouldn't be Inside Number Nine without a devious twist, and man, this one does not mess around with the direction that it goes. It's one of those ones where I definitely not want to spoil it for people. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one, especially kind of coming from the background of having seen some of those like older like TV horror movies with a certain kind of a brand of style to it. So yeah, that's my number four.
I'm so glad you're enjoying this show so much. It's great to hear. So that's my number three, The Devil of Christmas, the season opener. Another 8 out of 10 for me. It's ranked 27th out of 55, which is pretty much bang on average. I probably like it a bit more than that. This was the opposite of Private View. It grew on me based on what I remembered of it. And I think a lot of that is the rewatch, knowing the twist. The little hints they leave in is so, like you said, devilish. The intentionally campy acting and continuity errors make Garth Marenghi's Dark Place one of the easier comparisons, which is a show that I really love. I love Derek Jacobi doing the voice for the commentary track. There's so many great lines like I'm going to try and reveal this line without spoiling the episode. I think I can get away with it. Very hard to find a child actor given the subject matter of the film. So good. And yeah, the enjoyment of the episode will definitely hinge on your appreciation of the craft and your ironic enjoyment of crappy old movies. Um, I love the bit where Pemberton's like going through his lines really quickly because he wants to get to this ad shoot. Yeah, great comedic work and set up for what is a genuinely horrifying ending. Like the episode will end and you will just sit there like, you know, it's that kind of episode. So it's definitely now having rewatched it and grown a more bigger appreciation for it. It's going to become a part of my staple Christmas watching, I think. So, yeah, it's a real good one. Devil of Christmas, my number three.
Awesome. So it looks like we're on track for the same top two because my number three is Diddle Diddle Dumpling, which I also have an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this one. for the majority of the runtime, it's like quite the absurd little story that it has going on. Like this father discovers a single shoe outside on the way back from his daily run, and then quickly becomes obsessed with, finding the owner to bring it with the other one. Um, Hard to make out something so random. I actually read that apparently Reese Shearsmith actually saw a shoe on his way in or something once, and that was the genesis for the story. Um, so the guy goes to extreme lengths, putting up posters, making a website, doing radio spots to find like the rightful owner, and then eventually someone comes, and by then it's not so easy or simple to let go, and that's where it gets quite interesting, just to you know analyze like what's going on with this character. Feels like another episode that maybe would benefit from rewatch, just to like knowing where it ends up. Since there are definitely character motivations that don't strike you until you know where it's going. Um, the end of the episode, I can kind of see your point. I could probably do without the darker second one, but I didn't mind the commentary on like, the grief element and how that kind of plays into what's going on here, kind of turning the tone of the story upside down to something more serious. Um, I also thought the blink and you miss it nod to an affair mid-episode, I felt didn't really add anything, um, and they don't do anything with it. So I didn't need to be there. I guess it's just a red herring. But overall, I thought this was a really quirky and great one. I just had a lot of fun watching it.
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
definitely
my minute.
definitely no other episode like that one. But season three is kind of the season of episodes that are unlike any other one because you got that one, you got Devil at Christmas, and another one. My number two is The Bill, which I have at a 9 out of 10. It's ranked 12th on the IMDb ranking of the best Inside Number 9 episodes. Pretty high, and I think that's justified. Um, Basically, bunch of guys play badminton. They go for food afterwards, and they get into a pretty serious argument over the splitting of the bill. I don't want to say much more about it because both of these top two, I think you'll agree, are probably the biggest send ups of the concept where it's just twist, 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 and it just keeps going to such an absurd degree, but it's so well written and so well handled where it could have just got so convoluted and stupid, but both of them are just immaculately written. I really enjoy Philip Glenister as the rich Cockney. He has some great comedic moments in this episode. Um, his sort of outlandish personality. I love Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith's performances in this episode. Their chemistry, the bickering. They're both like 100% commitment the entire time. Um, you get the knife game at the end, which is very tense and ends in a very unexpected way in like twice. um, and much like the 12 Days of Christine, I feel like it does feel like a classic anthology show episode where this could have been made in the 80s or in even back in the 50s and 60s. The ending twist on first watch was a bit surprising. And it might be a little neat, but I can buy it. I can roll with the punches. I love how the performances turn sinister almost on a dime when it needs to. Yeah, it's very versatile acting from all of the actors in there because I guess on my first watch, one of my complaints would have been that I didn't really think the waitress character was all that convincing, but that's kind of part of the experience. So that's a moot point in the end of the day. So yeah, strong 9 out of 10. It's a great episode of TV. It's so entertaining. Probably be one of the good ones to show someone to try and get them into the show. So yeah, The Bill's my number two.
Nice. So I actually debated which order I was going to have these last two. I ended up going with the Riddle of the Sphinx next, um, which I have at a high 8 out of 10. Centered around a professor who makes crosswords with like this mind-bending wordplay. And this episode just lobs one bombshell twist after another at you. And seeing these last two episodes. These are the last two I watched because I watched it in IMDb rating order. It was just so much to handle in a good way. Um, like this one, just when you think you settled into what it is, another one is waiting around the corner, and each character entering the story with what we think is one motivation, then it's flipped on its head, and then it's flipped on them. Uh, the word clues are like quite clever, almost too clever for me half the time, like how much they can spit those things out. Um, but then it becomes like the dark human side of things where it all really leads into somewhere. Um, it's almost like so dark, it's unpleasant at times just because of how hard that they go on it. Once the paralysis component enters the story, it has quite disturbing and sad imagery and reactions to accompany the evolving story. And this episode does not shy away from showing you things you don't really want to see, and becomes quite heartbreaking and brutal by the end. So I think, honestly, not in a bad way, the thing that is the reason why I had it second is just because of how brutal and unpleasant it is by the end of it. But it's, definitely a special episode in its own way as well. So yeah, that's my number two.
Yeah, well said. Of course, it's my number one. 10 out of 10 for me. One of my favorite episodes ever of this show. And it ranks number three on the IMDb list. So it's we've seen all the top three on IMDb now, which were obviously 12 Days of Christine, Quiet Night In, and now The Riddle of the Sphinx. I think this might be the finest screenplay in the series. Uh, I don't feel like that's a overstatement. It's at least in the top three. The level of ingenuity and attention to detail and the amount of prep that must have gone into it and the amount of thought is absurd because everything comes back. It's like three or four times. And the fact that a crossword based thriller is this brutal and messed up and dark, but also darkly funny at times. Although the humor does kind of go away in the last 10 minutes of the episode, it is just played completely straight, which is quite rare for this show, as outside of like 12 Days of Christine. Pemberton again is fantastic. I say this every episode. And Shearsmith comes in for the second half of the episode. He's also great. But Alexandra Roach, she is fantastic because she has to sort of juggle two different characters almost. Well, I guess then there's also the, like you mentioned, the where it goes afterwards, where she has to just portray with her face so many emotions. She's fantastic. One of the best guest roles we've seen. Much like the trial of Elizabeth Gadge, I feel like a lot of my enjoyment is also down to the atmosphere here. You know, the lightning strikes and the sort of the coziness of it, but also the uncomfortable things that are going on within that cozy atmosphere. That contrast is really effective. Like I mentioned, it kind of feels like a send up of the format. It's like, oh, you think you know what the twist is? Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. And I'd actually forgotten about a couple of the twists because there's about like I don't know, there's countless. I can't even think. And that final dagger, that they're yours. I don't want to say what, but they're yours. And the, it's just crazy, given all that that character has done in this episode, and then that reveal of who the woman is like it is so messed up. It is absolutely unhinged. It's almost a feral episode of television. It's like, how did they get away with this? um, I don't want to say anything else. You've got to watch it because you might not like it, but it is something to behold. So, The Riddle of the Sphinx is my number one. What a crazy ride.
Can't argue with that. And of course, mine, I'm left with The Bill, which I'll give it a 9 out of 10. In true like chamber story fashion, you have such a simple idea, at least to start, as paying for a bill, and then it winds up being so much more. I agree a lot with your point about how it's the kind of story that you could have pictured having been done in like prior decades and also been a classic when it was done then as well. there's just so much to mine from ostensibly four people at a table having this debate over such a simple concept. So yeah, you got the group of four badminton players having a dinner out. The question lingers over the bill. I'm sure most people can relate to this on some level when it comes to this situation. Um, there was a point in the episode where I genuinely thought we would spend the whole runtime with characters going back and forth on that. And then we get a feast of twists. So there you go. One guy is basically a guest from down south who offers to pay. There's the stingy third member who would prefer to just pay their own. And of course, our two usuals with the two biggest egos squaring off to cover the whole thing. For the central debate, might be a cultural thing for me. I'm fully on the side of Kevin, the third guy, being in the pay what you ordered camp. I think they're poking fun at that archetype, but I still kind of agree with them. So um, it's one of those things you watch. It might be where you're coming from, who you agree with most when it comes to this type of thing. But of course, it's not really about that in the end, as it turns into five finger fillet to an upsetting consequence of that. Yet another big twist thereafter. Uh, One thing I wasn't 100% sure on is the significance of how the Craig character, the new guy, is used in the end scene. I guess it's meant to just be a new cycle of what we're watching unfold, but I wasn't sure if there was anything more to that that I was missing as to why it was so significant to see him doing what he's doing. But this is just an episode that just picks up and things start to happen in succession, and you don't really get a chance to prepare in a good way. There was definitely one moment where I audibly gasped, and I imagine you can probably guess which one that was. So, yeah, that's my number one of the season.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's the only nitpick I could give the episode really is that, like I said, it kind of feels like it skips a moment just to have the big ending where you could have maybe hinted a bit more as to where that was going because it kind of just skips to the cycle repeating, like you said.
Yeah,
Where I
I
feel
think its best twists happen prior to the last one, if that makes sense. So,
I still think it works as an ending, but I think if you were looking for a flaw, it would be that. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so there we go. Perhaps the greatest season of Inside Number Nine to date. If you've watched it, let us know what you think. We're on to season 4 next, and we will be including Deadline, the special. So it'll be 7 episodes to rank. Um, which was a live episode, which is very interesting. Um, and I'm sure there are some notable episodes in there. Well, I know there are, but which ones? I wonder. So thanks, Andrew, again for joining me. I think we went a bit shorter this time, but yeah. Um, we hope to have you again for the next ranking of Inside Number Nine. I think the next video with Andrew will be our next TV archive for 1995, but maybe not. We'll see. We'll see how quickly I can get through my last few shows. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we'll catch you soon.